Harriett Baldwin, Conservative MP, elected in 2010, and now the chair of the Treasury Select Committee. Only the second woman ever to hold that position. I'm going to start by something you said when you got that job, which was last year you were appointed. You said this: they say that one of the differences between men and women is that if a job is posted, the man will think, I've probably got 60% of those qualifications, I'm going to go for it. And a woman will think, I don't think I have 100%, so I might not put my name forward. The minute the opening occurred, your words, I thought, I'm 200% qualified to do this job. Give us some tips. Those of us who aren't as confident and probably have fallen into the category that you suggested when it comes to applying for some jobs.
Absolutely, and it was a moment where I realised that actually my whole life so far had been leading up to qualify me for the role that I currently am privileged to hold. I had worked in financial markets myself, so for over 2 decades I was with JP Morgan. I was one of the few female managing directors there, and then I changed career completely, gone into Parliament, and I was fortunate in 2015, after the 2015 general election, for that year in the run-up to the referendum, I was Economic Secretary, which is the minister in charge of the sort of financial services sector in the city. And then I'd been on the Treasury Committee for 3 years since the 2019 general election, and I'd tried the first time to get elected as chair and hadn't succeeded. So then when a vacancy occurred, I thought, I'm going to go for it. And fortunately, although there were 5 candidates, my colleagues in Parliament agreed and I was elected to the chair.
Where do you get that sort of confident inner streak, that self-belief, which is admirable and we all should have it? Where does yours come from?
I've grown up, someone born in 1960, in a world where women actually didn't do very much. They got married, they had children. I think my own mum, when she married my father, she actually gave up her job. And it wasn't considered the right thing to go to university if you were a girl. I mean, it was an environment where girls were told no. A lot of the time. And I'm one of those people who, if someone says no to me, that really makes me want to go for it. And so another area that said no was financial services, was the city. It was terribly posh, terribly male, if you recall. And I deliberately joined an American firm because I thought they would be more meritocratic than some of these old school type bastions of masculinity in the city. And sure enough, I had a flourishing career with JP Morgan. I'm very grateful to them for my time there. But even there, they said no a lot of the time. So there was no woman who, as an investment manager like I was, had ever come back from maternity leave. And so I'm in my mid-30s, I have my son, and I go back to work after 14 weeks, full-time, as a portfolio manager, travelling the world. And I get to the end of the year and my portfolios have done well and my client base had grown and I'd had a fantastic year. And my boss, starts to give me the bonus conversation. And he said, well, Harriett, you've had the most fantastic year. And your bonus really should be, double what you got last year. But because you took 14 weeks maternity leave, I'm cutting it proportionately as a result of that. And I said, really? Get HR in here now. I mean, you're meant to be paid for results, not for how much time you spend in the office. And yet I was the only woman in that firm who had ever returned from maternity leave in an investment manager position.
Why? Just because...
Well, not surprising, is it, when you think about the kind of no signals that management was sending out?
But that's maternity discrimination. Do you think it's alive and well,
This is the
it?
mid-90s, Gloria. Things have got a lot better since then. But, it was my generation that had to really fight against that, saying no, and no, you can't do that. And, I succeeded. I was very lucky. After that, they promoted me. I continued to go up the organisational ladder. But I was regarded as this kind of forerunner of those who've come after. And I think, we've every time someone says no to me, and then I would look at Parliament and I would look at Conservative MPs and I would think, they haven't got anywhere near enough women MPs. And of course, that's the moment when you start down that road to getting elected yourself.
When it comes to women in politics, I mean, we've now had 3 women prime ministers, all Conservative. we've had female foreign secretaries, the one job that we've never had a woman as Chancellor, a woman in charge of the nation's finances. Why is that the hardest nut to crack?
I think it's just been the circumstances, and I think we'll have one definitely in my lifetime. What I want to see in my lifetime is a 50-50 parliament. You know, when you were an MP, when I was first elected, we were still, in terms of the number of women who'd been elected, we were still smaller in number in the entire history of the United Kingdom than the number of men who were in Parliament at that time. I mean, that is an extraordinary statistic, isn't it? And, you know, good on you and every woman who stands for public office, because I think we do need to get to that 50-50 Parliament in our lifetimes.
Now, you're chair of the Treasury Select Committee, as we've said. The economy is at the centre of everything at the moment because people are hurting, families are hurting. The price of everything seems extortionate. Wage growth in real terms, it hasn't really moved for a couple of decades. I want to ask you about one of the Prime Ministers. The Prime Minister's first pledge, he outlined these 5 pledges. He said, we will halve inflation this year.
It doesn't feel like that yet, does it? No. And it's been such a terrible time for household budgets. It's been absolutely ghastly. Inflation, which, you know, I remember from growing up in the 70s, is an absolute curse on an economy. It is the worst tax a whole economy can pay. And of course, it's a tax on the very poorest households above all. And this particular bout of inflation has been particularly cruel because as a result of Putin invading Ukraine, you've got the price of energy going up so much, you've got the price of food going up so much. Now, those are 2 of the most important items in your household budget. And inflation has been unbearably cruel, particularly to those on the lowest incomes. So we've got to get inflation under control.
Our country, it seems to be harder in our country, in the UK, than it is in other countries. So, of course, everybody's been subject to these global factors, but why is it so tough for us? And so tough that the Prime Minister, as I say, made this his number 1 pledge. It doesn't look like it's going to make it.
I actually do think we'll see inflation come down over the second half of the year. We've already seen it go past the worst, but it is still far too high. It's still 4 times the Bank of England's target. And you're right in terms of the Prime Minister's pledge to halve inflation. He's given that job to the Bank of England, hasn't he? So through the Chancellor writes the Bank of England a letter, says, we want you to aim for 2% over time. And since the bank's been independent, it's been about 25 years, they have, on average, achieved that 2%. But at the moment, it just feels so painful. And of course, in terms of tackling it, you know, I think very much on the record as having been on the committee throughout this whole period of signalling to the governor you know, that things were getting out of control long before, you know, they really shot up. So I think there were signs that we were running into inflationary conditions. I think the bank was too slow and too late and too modest in terms of the rate increases needed to tackle the level of inflation. They thought it would be transitory.
And that means mortgages are forecast to keep on rising. These are hard things to... There's going to be an election in not too distant a future. This is a tough backdrop. What do you do? How do you sort of say to people, I'm really sorry, but your mortgage rates are just going to keep going up? Is that inevitable?
Well, I imagine that the Bank of England, again, they're independent. They have to make these decisions. I imagine that they will think about doing some more because, as you say, the UK story is still not over. And so for everyone who's been used to interest rates being quite ridiculously low by historic standards, you know, they were close to zero. I've got a 5-year fixed at the moment at like 1.2 something percent. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But those deals will come to an end in stages, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on those particular households. The other thing in our committee we've been campaigning on, as you've probably noticed, the day the Bank of England puts rates up, the banks put your mortgage up. But if you've got any savings, they haven't bothered to put your savings rate up. So all of those people out there who've actually perhaps paid off their mortgage, they've got some savings, and they've been used to getting nothing on those, the banks are sort of saying, oh, well, you can carry on getting virtually nothing on them. And we've been campaigning to try and get the banks to increase those savings rates for our constituents.
So your message in a sentence to those banks on those saving rates?
Yeah, is be fair to your loyal customers. It's often the loyalist customers, the ones who aren't comfortable moving money across with an app, the ones who can't find a single open bank branch on the high street anymore, who feel very uncomfortable opening a new bank account just for the rate. I did ask the Minister about this in the Commons this week, and he flagged up the fact that national savings, the premium bond products, a lot of those which are government backed, they do offer a good rate of interest. So, for your viewers, it's worth looking at the opportunities there as well.
Let's go back and talk about your experience in banking. You talked about maternity discrimination.
Yes.
Sexual harassment, misconduct, yes.
It was always been rife, hasn't it, in workplaces across the land. And, certainly as a young woman, it was not what you'd think of as a very conducive work environment. And I think we've even seen, this week with the FT breaking an amazing story about Crispin Odey, that really bad behaviour still exists in the financial services sector. I'm sure it exists in other sectors, but it's something that I've campaigned all my life to try and tackle and trying to stamp that out and to remove that barrier to women succeeding in that sector.
Can you think of any examples? You don't need to name names, obviously, but was it so commonplace that you would know who was the perpetrator or the sort of the wrong un?
Oh, God, it was just awful. And, I remember one example. So I'm in my mid-20s, I'm working in a trading room, and it had been a very, very busy day in the markets. And there's just myself and the big boss and another trader left in the dealing room. And the big boss walks through the dealing room and he goes, he's American, he goes, oh my God, what a day, he goes. It was like a Las Vegas casino. Except the difference is that in a Las Vegas casino, of course, the women would wear short skirts. And he comes over to me and he gives my skirt a sort of hoik. Now, obviously that was appalling.
Yeah.
And the thing that was really detrimental about it is that he was the big boss, I never could look him in the face ever again. It was just so humiliating. And that was with only one colleague watching. So yeah, it was a really occasionally unpleasant work environment.
Final question. Yeah. You've worked in 2 hostile environments for women, politics.
They're getting better.
And finance. Yeah. They are.
They are.
Which is the most hostile? Which has the most work to do?
Well, it's been 15 years since I've worked in the financial sector, and I'm confident that despite this Crispin Odey story that, by and large, things have got a lot better. And I think women have got better at calling out that kind of bad behaviour. But, and I think politics actually is incredibly welcoming to women. I think that it is a great career for a woman, great second career for a woman. I really encourage women who are watching this to think about it as a career, because it is just so rewarding to make a difference for your community and to make a difference for people in other ways. It's
been great to talk to you. I feel like you've made us all want to make a difference. Your positivity and your energy and your no-nonsense style, love it. Harriett Baldwin, thank you.
Thank you, Gloria, for having me on.